In order to better understand how OSHA applies to us as technicians in the aerospace program, we have to kind of concern ourselves to who is covered by the Act. Under the Act, we can see that it applies or extends to all employers and their employees in all 50 of the continental United States, District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and all other territories under federal government jurisdiction. Examples of this would be Guam, Puerto Rico, and the islands in the Middle East. As I said, not only knowing who is covered under this regulation, but also who's not covered under this regulation is very pertinent to make this work. In order to understand who's not covered under the Act, we kind of have to look at the regulation to determine that it's persons that are self-employed, people who work on farms, as long as they are family members that are outside of that unit family, working conditions that are regulated by other federal agencies or statutes. This would be your government reservations like the NASA reservation, Air Force installations, Army installations. Under the guidelines given by Congress, OSHA was given the responsibility to promulgate legal enforceable standards within the continental United States, its U.S. territories and protectorates. Employers have the responsibility under this Act to make sure that they know which ones of these laws and regulations apply to the kind of work and trades that they do. Employees must comply with all the appropriate rules and regulations that are associated with their job place and their hazards. And when there are no specific hazards or no specific standards for the hazards that they face, then what applies is what's referred to as our General Duty Clause. The General Duty Clause is a clause by which an employer is bound to provide a workplace that is free of all hazards to the employee. Failure to do so is a violation and is citable under OSHA law. So the next issue we deal with is these standards. What do we do in an emergency situation when in some cases temporary standards must be set? OSHA is authorized to set these temporary standards that take effect immediately under certain very limited conditions. Examples of this would have been the World Trade Center when it came down. No time other in history have we ever dealt with the dusts and the hazards associated with asbestos and that were coming down in those time frames. And so workers were breathing this, and it would lead to long-term chronic health effects in the form of respiratory problems. So they were able to set standards. Other times when they're able to do it is when workers are in a grave danger or exposed to toxic substances or agents before these products haven't really been done. So it's kind of been a testing and a development role. An emergency standard is also needed any time that we have to protect workers that are not otherwise covered by the regulations. Employers have a little bit of rights under this, though. They have the ability to challenge the validity of a regulation. They have the ability to challenge the validity of a particular standard that's been set. In that sense, the next thing we have to deal with is when there is a problem, when are they authorized to come in and perform inspections on this? Every company that does business in continental United States, the U.S. territories, or protectorates is subject to an inspection criteria. These are normally what we call routine inspections, which means the Secretary of Labor will set specific standards for that year or guidelines for items of special interest that they want inspected. These inspections are conducted without advance notice, although circumstances may require OSHA to let them know that they're coming. For example, at the Space Center, you cannot just go onto a government installation. You have to be cleared in or escorted. So in a limited situation like that, they would appear, present their credentials, and would be called upon to be escorted to the various areas where they had to work. On the other side of that coin is we need to understand is that OSHA, even though they're a federal organization, they are not authorized to conduct warrantless inspections. This has been challenged in court, and it's been won, as it shows up here in the Marshall and the Barlow's Incorporated Act. This trial set a standard by which they just cannot be going down the street and decide, I'm going to stop over here today. There has to be just cause for them to go in and do that type of an inspection. As we start through this program today, what we want to do is we want to focus in on what I call key OSHA compliance programs that will definitely impact us as technicians. Hazardous communication programs, lockout-tagout programs, confined space programs, and the rest of the ones that are listed here are the ones that will primarily impact you as a technician in the aerospace world.